Hi everybody, welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yi.
And I'm Roy Cannaday.
And today we're going to Chaos Burger, and we're putting in an order.
Chaos!
This is Circadians Chaos Order. This is from Garphill Games. Not Shem Phillips' design, Zachary Smith and Sam McDonald. Roy, this is your first Garphill game.
This is the first Garphill game I have played. Mike DeLisio has tried to keep me out for too long, but now I have played a Garphill game.
In your face, Mike.
There we go.
Yes. So this is very much unlike any of the other games. Raiders of the North Sea, Paladins, Wayfarers, all of those games are much more Eurocentric.
So that's why I would like this one more?
Right, well, I was like, hey, I need someone to play this with.
Let's do it.
Lucky you. So this is definitely a dudes on a map, area control kind of game. Like I said, a little bit out of the wheelhouse.
Definitely still has Euro underpinnings, though, so lots of stuff going on there as well. Lots of resource management and moving things around.
Absolutely. It's a long game. The box itself says 2 to 4 hours. There's a lot of rules, so I'm going to do a rules overview for you, but I'm definitely not going to be teaching you all of the rules to the game. If I left something out, that's pretty much on purpose so that it wouldn't be very long. Let's show you a good, brief overview of the game. Here's a bit of a simplified setup for Circadians Chaos Order. There are 6 asymmetric factions in the game here, which will all score glory points or victory points in different ways. So for example, the purple Oxataya player here wants to win 9 combats, and if they do so, they will win the game immediately. The gray AI player over here is going to want to kill a certain number of units. You notice that the track is longer because they can kill more units in a single battle. Whereas the Circadians faction only has 4 steps of glory track, but they have the hardest thing to do. Each step requires them to upgrade a faction attribute, which is much more difficult. The second win condition is if you control the territory with all 6 of the remaining relics at the end of the first round. But at the end of the first round, the number 1 relic will come off of the board, and now the win condition at the end of the second round is if you control all 5 of the remaining relics, each round another one of these coming off, to the point where controlling all the remaining relics at the end of a round becomes much more achievable, and that's the other win condition. This is an individual player board here showing soldiers they can recruit in the first or second steps, 2 steps of recruitment, various leaders that they can put out with matching standees who have different strength in combat and different abilities. There are buildings that they can construct out on the board, giving them more income at the end of each round, as well as being able to secure a better presence out on the map, and asymmetric player abilities over here, which can be upgraded over the course of the game to make players even more differentiated from each other. Each of the 6 rounds will follow all of these steps from top all the way to the bottom. You reset and then continue again up to 6 times. The first thing that'll happen is every faction will set prices on the different actions that they can choose to take. So let's say that the AI player chose to take one of their pricing tiles and put it out here onto recruitment. This is going to tell a few things. First, it's going to show how much, in order to do that action, other players will have to pay that faction and to the bank, energy being the main resource that's going to drive the actions of the game. And it's also going to allow you as your player faction to do that for free. So let's say that the purple player here, Oxataya, want to harvest. Any uncovered spaces will get covered by these neutral bidding tokens, and that is the set prices phase. Now we're going to go through each of the actions of the game. Because the green Larian faction priced Discover, they get to do this action first, and so they'll carry out the action at the level where their cube is, so they get 1 discovery, 1 upgrade. They can further pay, if they want, additional resources to take the bottom action down here. So if they do this one, they can upgrade any one of their action cubes a space over to the right, they get any immediate benefits, and they upgrade that action. All the other players clockwise now can pay the Larian faction 2 energy and to the bank 3 energy in order to do this action as well. The build action will allow players to build either a foundation off of their player board to unlock a special ability and have new places to put buildings out, or they can construct a building off of their player board and put it onto the map so that they unlock new income and have more presence on the board. The harvest action is going to allow players to get more energy as well as to activate the income of different spots out on the board, showing a gear symbol if they have the correct type of building. Recruit will allow players to bring more units onto the map, and if they have multiple steps of their player board, they can move units to the right, 1 step for each recruit. Move will allow players to move up to all of the units from 1 hex to an adjacent hex this number of times, and there's no limit to the number of times that each individual unit can move on a single turn. Now that the movement phase is done, combat will begin in every space that has more than one faction's units in it. Starting with the first player, they will choose one of their combats to initiate. Once that combat is done, the next player in clockwise order will choose another combat to initiate. When resolving a combat, both players will count up their strength. Each basic soldier will add 1 strength to the combat, and any leaders will have different ratings over here. So this player adds 2 strength and 2 shield to the purple faction over on this side. Each player will then take one of the wheels here and be able to determine how they want to use it, and if they want to use any of these tactics cards as well. Players would then reveal exactly what the end result is going to be. Combats are resolved in 3 steps as shown on the combat wheel over here. First, the player who has the most strength will win the combat. Purple had 6 going into it and gray had 5. However, purple played this combination of the wheel and card, which gave them 2 extra strength, plus they spent a ruby to be able to roll a die and add 2 more strength to it, plus they used this combat card in a region with a relic, therefore they add 2 more combat to it. Since they are the overwhelming winner, they will be determined to have won this combat. However, step 2 is where you calculate casualties. The AI faction wasn't actually interested in winning the combat, instead they just wanted to murder more units. Therefore, they didn't pump up their combat strength at all, instead they have 5 kills that can go through. You will reduce the number of kills by the number of shields, so shown over here, this player has 2 shields. So 5 minus the 2, 3 casualties will occur, where these will go back to the player's board to have to be recruited again in the future. Because kills is the AI's victory point condition, they will move 3 steps up on their glory track. Purple, however, wins this combat, so the gray units all will go back to their home base. Purple won a combat, meaning that they will win 1 glory. After combat's resolved, players will gain income based on the number of hexes that they have present. They still have units or buildings left on the board with better income for having more spaces under their control. Lastly, you do the check relic phase, where you check the relic with the matching number of the current round. Whichever player controls that relic will get that relic, take it off of the board, place it on their player board to get a benefit. Now, that doesn't come close to covering all the rules, but once one player reaches the end of their glory track or controls all the remaining relics, they're the winner of the game. So let's go back and talk about our thoughts. So Roy, you're not averse to asymmetric and confrontational games and everything.
I gotta say, that's basically my go-to. Like, I love games with interaction in them. I love games that have varied player powers. I love games, honestly, like, people try to pin me into like, oh, he likes combat and fighting and stuff, which I do, but also I really enjoy when there's like solid mechanical underpinnings to all of that as well. Like, my favorite style game is really hybrid style games, and that's basically what this is. It has a lot of like smashing and fighting stuff that's very important to the game, but also there's a lot of like action economy and like making sure you have the right resources to do the actions you need, making sure you have the right resources to put your people out on the board, you know, and upgrading all of your stuff, which is all very Eurocentric mechanics, which also are super crunchy and good.
I really like that there's a pricing mechanism, so that there's a little bit of that. I like pricing mechanisms in games in general. The fact that you get the action for free, but then also everyone else has to choose to pay you or not based on that action. You're doing a lot of paying each other, but there are some tiles that are certainly more expensive than others, and so when do you price the movement action incredibly highly to make a lot of money off of people, because movement can be super necessary this round.
And it's very interesting of like the fact of like, man, and also the order that they go in matters as well, because it's like, okay, well, if I do something that make it expensive at the top, maybe I'll get a little bit of extra money to be able to pay them the money back in on a later action. And also like I need to make sure I can get that action done, so I need that action to be free for me, because if I don't have enough energy to play that action, that's going to put me behind, you know? And different factions are going to value different actions differently as well. It's also like very asymmetrical in like the in-game triggers for the different stuff. So like, I really need to trigger this so I can upgrade my actions. I really need to trigger this so I can get more units on the board. I really need to trigger this so that I can build out more buildings. It has all interesting stuff as far as like how those actions work and valuing which ones you need to do on which turns.
I think one of the immediate questions that people will probably have is you hear asymmetric, confrontational troops on a map game. People are going to say, how does it compare to Root? How does it compare to something like Oath or something?
Right.
This is less asymmetric than Root, where the factions, for the most part, function very similarly to each other.
Yeah.
But there's enough asymmetry, like you said, that it really goes into your value judgments of how much is a particular action going to be important to you this round. What are you looking for out of combats? Are you looking to win a bunch of combats? Are you looking to specifically go into combat where other players have leaders?
Right.
Because I need 5 glory points to win, but they come from only killing leaders.
Yeah.
Which is harder to do.
Right.
So I think that more of the game is shared and common, but like you said, the end game triggers and kind of what you're looking for out of combat is different.
I do think it's cool too, because like different players could gravitate towards different play styles. I mean, I think everybody has different play styles when they play games, and you could pick a faction. Like if you want to have a faction that like builds up those tracks and does all the Euro stuff, like there's a faction like that's literally what they're supposed to do. They have to build up those tracks. There's another faction that has to upgrade all their cards to win the game. There's another faction that's just like combat. Get in combat, win the combat. And I mean, that's amazing as well. Another thing I think is really cool is the fact that like when you win the locations, because there are locations that are basically going to trigger on different rounds of each round. When you win those locations, regardless of what it is, majority of the time it helps you towards your in-game trigger. So even if you're not upgrading the card or upgrading a track or winning a combat, you're putting that thing on your thing, and then you're hopefully pushing yourself towards your in-game trigger, which is another cool way of like forcing everybody to try to play the area control game a little bit as well.
Yeah, and that's even the faction that wins by upgrading all of their research tracks, all the discovery tracks, they still need to fight because they can't let other people keep winning all of the combats. So they can't just completely turtle up. They have to go out there and kind of slow other people down while focusing on research.
It's so funny. I played the combat faction mostly in this game, and I even though I was playing them, I still upgraded all of my actions like crazy. Just because one of the first locations I got allowed me to basically spam upgrades a little bit. I was like, better actions is good. So I was like doing all this stuff, and then I'm like, wait, there's a faction that wants to do that as well. So it's just cool to see all the different varieties of how the different factions come together.
You have a different mix of them each game. There's 6 factions. You play with up to 5, which I would not play this at 5, because this is going to lead to some of the downsides of this game. It's very involved.
Right.
It's difficult to teach, and it is long.
Right.
More players will just add to that game length.
I think because there's so much you can do in the game as well, it could lead to a little bit of analysis paralysis here and there. You know, if you're like, oh my goodness, which action do I really need? Oh my goodness, what order should I take this turn in? And the more players you have, the more that's going to compound. Like this is not, I mean, when you're talking about big, like area control, resource management, this isn't like full 4X really, because it doesn't really have the exploration and stuff, but it gives you that vibe of that sort of game. When we're talking about that style of game, there's our big, long, epic games. This is more in that genre a little bit. It is more of a bigger, longer, epic game as far as like how long the playtime is. And
I applaud them being Garphill Games, for putting the accurate time on the box, 2 to 4 hours.
Right.
That's correct. My first game, teaching me learning it from the rulebook, teaching to 2 other brand new people, took 4.5 hours. That was the full game day.
Right.
But it was pretty epic. It really came down to the second to last round. Someone was going to control both of the last areas, right? Because there were only 2 of those big relic machines left, and someone really was like fighting with all a tooth and nail to get to both of them, and someone else triggered their glory track victory just before that.
Right.
That feels great when both endgame paths are viable, but it's a lot of work to get there.
There's a lot of interesting stuff in this as well. I mean, the fact that each of those round markers is coming off, which means you need to control less and less space to win the game, and it all comes down to the one space. Like, if you get to that round, it could be like 2 spaces or even 1 space. If one player controls that, they win the game, and it leads, but everybody knows that from the beginning. It's like, that space is going to be valuable. It's not that valuable yet. Do I push for it at the beginning and try to build up a stronghold there, or do I push for it later? And then in the end game, some people have so many units. At the end of one of our games, we were like, building so many units. It's like, oh, a whole bunch of mine died. Let me just build a ton more units, because we had upgraded our recruit action so much. So it's like, and then our movement actions were so crazy. It's like, I move all of them there. So like all of our units are in one space on the board. And then we're like, huh. That leads into the combat of the game, which we didn't really talk about much. Like this has very deterministic like number combat, but then you're also putting in cards as well to try to like do your attack or defense, and then with a little dial as well. This reminds me very much of like Dune or Scythe style combat. And then you also have this option to roll a die to add a little bit of extra numbers to that as well, but you have to pay resources to do that. So there's a little bit of resource management to have the correct resources, and it's the rare resource, the rubies or whatever they're called in the game, to actually be able to roll that die. I love this style of combat in games. Like I love the trying to math out and best your opponent by like what do they have in their head, like what are they doing? Are they going to go hard on this location? Or are they going to hard on this location? Should I go hard here to win here, or should I like save back and pull for this? And like being able to have those combat cards to play at the right time. I love that style of combat, and since it's mostly about trying to get in the other player's head, I think it's a blast as far as like how that stuff works together. And sometimes like we had a combat in one of our games like later on where it's like, I think I mathematically can't lose this based off what you have. Cool, you know, so it makes it like interesting when you have those situations where you can set it up to where it's like, I need this location, I'm taking this location.
You went all in on that one, and I took a gambit on the other one, you know, and it was fun to see that. It really came down to that kind of razor's edge in that particular two-player game. I think this game plays well at 2 even. Which
is actually shocking, because most of these style games don't really play that well at 2.
I agree. I think I preferred it with more. I think 3... Right. I think 4 is going to be a really good player count for it.
It's really just to have those interactions in between the asymmetrical powers is where this game really shines.
Yeah, I think that's cool because it highlights more of that if you have 3 or 4 factions, 3 or 4 players at the table. The downside is a 2-player game can definitely be quicker, and so more players means more playtime, more people you have to teach and to clarify the rules. There's a lot of rules. This is not what I would call the streamlined game, but despite how complex it is, I think that one of the things that does shine through, this being published from Garphill Games, I think the iconography is, for the most part, very good. I think that the layout of the board, having the whole round structure from top to bottom there on the board, makes everything understandable quicker. You know, it does a lot of things right, despite the fact that the design space is just kind of, it's a big, chunky game.
There were parts in our game where I looked at my player board, I'm like, huh, I think this works like this because of the iconography. And Chris is like, you're exactly right. You know, some of the stuff just makes sense with like the way things are set up.
It's a bit of an unwieldy game. 4 hours, a lot of rules, a lot of little nuance to the battle, to the combat. Nuance, I think, that adds some fun tension to it. But nuance.
It's not necessarily going to be short, especially when you're like trying to math out in your opponent's head. And then if you're not involved in those combats, it might not be as exciting for you.
Yes. So those are the downsides to be aware of. As unwieldy as it kind of is, it also is focused a little bit. I think that they did some very good decisions with those relics coming off the board, having fewer areas to have to control to win the game as the game goes on, means it won't drag on forever. 6 rounds. That's going to be it. But I still come back to that play time, that teach. And I'm not trying to harp on that point too much, but it's a lot. Roy, do you have any final thoughts?
So my final thoughts, for me, as far as like this score for this game, I'm giving it a 7.5. I enjoy it. I think it's a game that's a lot of fun. I don't know, I mean, personally, how much I'm going to go back to it over and over again, because this is a genre that has a bunch of style of games, but I really do enjoy the Euro side of the game, the building up your stuff and putting guys out. Like, I enjoy hybrid style games, and if you like to have those hybrid style games that has more of that action economy and figuring out how to like get your resources properly to get your stuff out there with a lot of asymmetry, you should check this game out just because I think it's fun and it's solid. You just have to realize going into it, it's going to be longer. It's going to be a game that's going to take a while to play. It's going to take one that's going to be a little bit hard to get through all the rules just because like any highly asymmetrical game with a lot going on is going to be that. I think it's worth it to go through all that stuff. But yeah, 7.5 for me. I enjoy the game. I'm coming in just a hair higher at an 8. I really like this, despite the fact I don't know how often I'll play this. Right, exactly. To me, this kind of harkens back to when we discussed Oath a little bit, in that Mike was in that review with us, and he found that game worth the effort more than the rest of us did. Right. I'm finding this to be really fun and worth the effort, though I don't know the next time I'll play it. Right. I would happily play it again. I think that when I'm in the mood for a game that is both epic and as you were saying, has those really solid Eurogame underpinnings. Right. Has that Garphill Games touch
of smooth iconography, things that make the game more approachable despite how difficult it is. This is a really good one. And also has some Kemet kind of going out there fighting and messing with everyone. It's really good. I wish I could go higher. I can't, though, just because of how seldom I think I'm going to get this game actually to the table. All right.
Cool.
Well, there you go. That's our thoughts on Circadian's Chaos Order, one of the most ambitious games from Garphill Games. Yeah, we're saying that we definitely liked it. Thanks for coming out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yi.
And I'm Roy Cannaday.
Be epic. Or else.